Well, this is very interesting. First time that this happens. We've had um, a technical issue, but I'm very happy to be here with Lisa. I guess Wendy is already here. Will she be joining us, Lisa?
Yes, she is. She is in the waiting room somewhere.
Oh, there
Okay,
she is.
Wendy, we have Wendy. This is amazing. So part of the beauty of this is that it's all natural. There's no way to fake it. So you're both highly accomplished experts, and we're very excited to have people have a chance to interact with you directly today. So I apologize, we didn't have a lot of time for pre-show chat.
That's okay.
But we've talked about our presentation today. I'm really excited to give people an insight into what executive recruiter actually does, and whether it sounds, sometimes it feels like it's like this magic that you're doing in the background, and should I even talk to them? It's kind of scary. But when you speak with Lisa and Wendy, you just get this kind of warm, fuzzy feeling, and like everything's okay in the world.
Isn't that nice?
It is. So we will have a few slides for everybody that's here today. Just so you know, we welcome your questions in the chat, and I'll be moderating those and eventually putting things on screen and all of that. Lisa and Wendy, would you like to introduce yourselves and your firm?
Sure. Great. So I'm Lisa Vuona, and I am the co-owner of Boyden Boston with Wendy. And Wendy and I have known each other for many years. We met at another recruiting firm, and we have stayed friends. And we have a nice complement in our backgrounds. I have much more of an HR and recruiting background, both in-house and partnering with institutions and universities externally to help with recruiting. And Wendy is more on the advancement side. Wendy?
Great. Thank you. Luis, thank you so much for inviting us to be on your program here. So as Lisa shared, I have spent a little more than 25 years as a frontline fundraiser, as a manager, as a chief advancement officer, and as a recruiter. And so I've really sat on every side of the table. I've been a candidate. I've been a recruiter. I've been part of search committees. And so that definitely, brings that perspective as we're working with clients and candidates.
That's amazing. So I've been, thinking of your vast experience in the field. What are you seeing now that's different? So, let's start a little bit about trends in recruiting and, hiring fundraisers now. What are you seeing now? What's different than maybe 2 years ago?
So I'll start. So thinking about things that are different, I think from the candidate side of the house, more and more people are asking us about culture. I think the first thing people would ask, what are my roles and responsibilities? What is the salary? Usually those used to be the first two questions. And now almost always the first question is, what is the culture like at XYZ University? And, what is the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging culture? And how am I going to fit in there? And I think that's probably the number one shift that we're seeing. And some of that I think is, during COVID, people started working at home. And now people are back to some type of a hybrid. Some folks are there full time, back in the office. Some folks are working 2 days in, 3 days out. And I think if you had a really great culture at your institution and people moved home, that culture moved with it. You still did Zooms and you still did, networking, and you still got to connect with people. But if that culture really wasn't there, or that sense of belonging, people really started to see that shift. And as they look for a position, they're really asking, how am I going to fit in there?
I would say also, I think for hiring managers, it's super competitive. I mean, the Great Resignation is real for many reasons. And so I think for people who were in a job search thinking maybe it's time to move on, they are. But everyone else is reading about the Great Resignation. And so I think people who weren't even thinking about leaving are like, should I be looking for a job? To Lisa's point, if you have a great culture, if there's a great leader, if there is incredible and important mission, vision, and values, and the actions are aligned with that, people will stay. But I think that more people are looking for jobs. We're also finding that candidates are calling us back. I mean, we think that people called us back before, but
so it's not only us that are ghosted. That also happens to you. Oh my goodness, mind shattering.
Not everyone would go back.
But it is super competitive. And I think that, means that hiring managers really need to make sure that they're walking the walk, need to make sure that the actions of the organization and the culture is really aligned with the mission of their organization.
So this is really interesting because you have kind of, and Lisa was sharing some of these insights with me. You have a little bit of a dual role because you're hiring, yes, but you're also advising the organization on, this is what we're seeing in the market. Salary, culture, these things are important right now for the candidates we speak to all day, every day. How can an organization make that culture kind of, so obvious, that it's, because honestly, job descriptions aren't so appealing, right? And there was just a great post by Jim Langley about them. What is it that people that are on the call today who manage teams, how can they get that word out that in fact their place is pretty amazing? And I have to say that of mine, right? We're kind of not in a typical place where you'd be, but the culture is just so great. I don't know how to get that word out. What would you do?
Yeah. So I would just say that your employees are your greatest ambassadors. And so, I think digital platforms like LinkedIn, I think places like Glassdoor, but I think also having conversations. And I also think as you walk around your organization, to ask yourself, if we are talking about that our organization is a place of inclusion and belonging, then I think it's important that as you're walking around your organization or your campus to be asking yourself those questions, right? As I walk around this campus, does it look like what we are talking about, right? And so how are you also an ambassador for values, and how are you also kind of sharing things that are great, and then also talking, to your managers about, maybe where there isn't that alignment. But everyone who works for an organization, and that's people on your team, and everyone, I would say everyone, even from, the person who's at the front gate, or I remember somewhere that I worked that in the lunchroom at a large hospital, boy, that woman who, worked the cash register, she was the happiest person, and she was a huge ambassador for the organization. And I think especially in organizations where you have parents, prospective students, patients, everyone is an ambassador for your culture.
I think more and more organizations are putting that culture piece or more feeling into job descriptions, because all too often job descriptions were, step one, carry a portfolio of 150 prospects and make, and yes, you need to have those things in the job description so someone knows that. But there's that summary at the top. And a lot of organizations we're seeing are putting that summary, really wants to have fun at work, or something about their institution, their culture, or how the team works. Really, this is a collaborative team, and putting things in there to have a little bit more feeling in the otherwise very cold and sterile job description.
Right.
53 visits per second.
Right. So I see this, COVID showing us the true culture values of our employers. This is why people are leaving. We talk to people every day who say they don't feel that their workplace is a place where they feel included, where they feel they belong. I've talked to many people who say, I love my organization, but there is not that kind of flexibility, even during COVID, that I need. And so, yes, COVID, the events of May 2020, everything that's happened in the past 2 years is making culture and values incredibly transparent. Organizations can't shy away if their workplace is not aligned with the statements that they are putting out there.
Oh my goodness. So we had very well planned out schedule for today. So I had slides. I'm just going to throw them away because we have lots of really good questions in the chat. But that's okay with you. And you can, you can tell you're working with highly successful professionals when you can just do this on the fly. So let me start asking some of these questions. Let me see. Steve Becker, a wonderful a wonderful donor participation project member, is asking about salary. And for better or worse, that's still an important factor. Salary is top of mind for everyone, and we all know nonprofit pros should make more. As a candidate, what's the best way to get the most out of a job offer? What are your thoughts about that?
So I would say, my advice is always talk about salary in your initial conversation. A lot of people do not want to bring this up. So whether you have a recruiter, you're talking with the internal recruiter, an external recruiter like us, I will always bring up salary in that first conversation, because if I'm talking with somebody that's in the salary ranges of 100 to 125,000 and this person's at 150, I need to figure out where we are regarding salary. And I will always check in on salary as the conversations keep going. So I think for hiring managers to talk about it, and you can ask what a salary range. Usually the question I say is, what type of salary range are you looking for as you sort of take a peek at this position? When it comes to the offer, when you're at offer stage, this is really the only time for you to do this. You don't want to be in the position and 3 months later be thinking, I should have really asked for 140,000 and instead I'm at 120. It can be uncomfortable negotiating salary. If you have a recruiter, sometimes it's a lot easier because you don't have to do this with your soon-to-be new boss. You're doing it through a recruiter, but it is asking all of those questions. Is there any wiggle room in the salary? I really would like to be here when it comes to salary. So I would say be upfront with it. There's gentle ways to talk about it, and it can be uncomfortable, but there's only one time to do it, and that's before you're hired.
I would add a couple of things. First, I would say on your resume, make sure that you're including any place that you've spoken, any papers that have been published, committees and task forces that you have been on. If you're a volunteer, maybe you are president of the board of whatever organization you're involved in, put that down. Don't just say volunteer in name of the organization, right? You are presenting your full self. And so that also increases your value. The other thing that I would ask, that doesn't really cost organizations that much money, I would ask about professional development. If you're going into a management role, I'd ask about coaching, right? These are things that maybe are included. I know many colleges and universities have amazing career development centers. Maybe that is a resource. Maybe there are other resources. But I would really think about your value. Make sure that you're showcasing your, everything about yourself. Don't shy away from, it doesn't fit on one page, it doesn't fit on 2 pages. That's okay.
This is part of the amazing value that you both bring in having like that third party, because I've heard this, why would I need to, or we can't afford it. But I just have to say, having somebody with whom the candidate, and I've been in the candidate role and in the hiring role too, is having somebody that you feel comfortable talking to about these things, where you can just, talk frankly about the salary and what you're looking for. That is very helpful. A great comment / question from Becky Palak. Thank you, Becky. It's great to have you here today. As a startup, we can't afford to hire a fundraising executive yet, but we think a fractional exec would really help us get ahead and get to the point where we can hire somebody. What questions should I ask when I'm trying to recruit and hire the right person for this type of fractional role? So have you done a lot of work with fractional executives?
Is this more of like a part-time? I wonder if Becky is looking for like a part-time, or maybe like a fundraising consultant. There are a lot of consultants, if that's what her question is. It's certainly, as startups, it's very difficult to say, great, we'll hire, an incoming executive director at $200,000. There just isn't the running ground for that. Mm-hmm. I would say there are a lot of fundraising executives that have turned into consultants. I know, Wendy had a practice prior as well, doing some consulting and really helping nonprofits set up. What do we need? Everything from setting up the 501c3 to what do we need as far as fundraising goes? What are our goals? What is the board? I'm sure there's a board. What are the board's goals? And eventually, where do we need to be in the next year, 2 years, 5 years to hire someone that would be a paid salary?
I would also think about on your board, do you have someone who has fundraised for another organization? Maybe they can be helpful. I also think more and more universities actually have nonprofit management degrees. Perhaps you can bring on an intern. Or someone has to do a fellowship, and that could be really valuable as well to give you that startup, experience and get you up and running.
Wonderful. Thank you. It's great to have your insights today. There's a couple more questions about salaries as relates to the hybrid and or in-person or remote. First, Jill Bond is asking, how are people negotiating a hybrid work setup as part of package negotiations? Are you hearing that a lot? What is your take?
Yeah. Well, first I want to say hi, Jill. So good
Hi,
to, see you wherever you might be. So I wish we could see everyone's names on screens, because I'm sure there's a lot of people who we know. And so just hi to everyone, who we might know. I think that it's really important, again, get out the gate with that. Most organizations that we are talking with are in a hybrid setup, but put it all out there. What do you need? What is your organization going to cover in terms of internet or equipment or whatever it might be? So I think that today we're in a much more transparent conversation in talking about, everything that you need to be productive, efficient, and, kind of bring the most. So I would put all of that out there. If you're working with a recruiter, ask all those questions. But I would just feel free, if it's directly with a hiring manager, ask the questions up front.
I will say one quick thing. We have, a couple of positions that are 100% remote. People could live in Michigan and work across the country. And folks are like tripping over themselves to interview for those positions. And I know not every position can be remote, of course. There are times you need to walk by the dean and have conversations. I absolutely get that. But if there are positions that could potentially be remote, to really take a second glance at that as a hiring manager or HR person, because this is, top of mind for folks. We did this through the pandemic, can we do it moving forward?
Absolutely. Would you say that there's a feeling that the power balance has shifted, maybe because there's so much demand for fun? How is that? That's always, a little bit of a dance. Is that a little bit different now? Or is it kind of the same principles as always, just, people, have different needs like hybrid, et cetera?
I think it's a bit of a mix. I think certainly people, oftentimes, like Jill was saying, do have a bit of a need of, I need hybrid, or I'm accustomed to working 2 days at home. I've really enjoyed it. I'm wildly productive in those 2 days at home. I'd like to keep that. But I also feel like this is the time that, folks have left positions because of things like culture, as we were saying, and now they're really in the driver's seat. Candidates are in the driver's seat of, I can be choosy. I know that I have a really great track record in fundraising. Somebody would love to have me on their team, so I can be a bit more selective on where I'm going. I think one thing that's definitely changed is the length of time, where I think institutions used to take, a very long time to do that hiring process for a very variety of reasons. Lots of people had to be part of the interview process. You went in versus Zoom. So things have been shortened. But I think usually when we're working with candidates, they already have some other offers, or they're already pretty far down the road with some other candidates with some other clients at the same time. So we are letting our clients know, if you're interested in so-and-so, we want you to know they're also, working with another institution right now. So we have to move a little bit quicker with so-and-so.
Well, wonderful. And I look forward to learning a little bit more about your practice and your work as a Boyden member, or you'll explain that to us in a moment. But I hear it's going so well, and we want to hear about that. But we have so many questions in the chat that I'd be remiss if I didn't bring them up. Kathy, who is a dear friend, mentor, colleague, I've known her for over 10 years. She says, are you finding that institutions are reducing salaries for fundraisers who work remotely versus campus-based? Kind of like a Google thing, right? Where they said that now if you're remote, but in North Carolina, we're not going to pay you as much. Are you finding that?
We have not seen that yet. And I hope that does not become a trend. But we haven't seen that yet. The salary is what it is, whether you're in-house or, working remote?
I think especially, in fundraising, a whole lot of money was raised in the past 2 years. And, I think that while we all miss, having a cup of coffee with a donor, going out for breakfast, going out for lunch, donor conversations are still happening. And so I think that organizations are really recognizing that. The fact is, your fundraisers should not be at their desks, right? They should be out there.
To begin
And
with,
so
right?
I think that's a recognition. I do think, though, it'll be interesting. Like, let's connect a year from now and get a sense of, how do teams feel? How do people feel they know their colleagues? Those organic conversations that aren't happening in the parking lot, in the cafeteria. We don't know what we're missing. It's something, right? And I think that's where people have to be proactive and intentional in getting to know colleagues, in forming relationships with people in other departments, especially, in college and university settings. So let's pick that up. We'll come back in a year, hopefully before.
Please, this will be great. What I love is that we're discovering this common thread of focusing with intention on the culture, on those small kind of bumps that are not going to happen naturally. You now maybe have to schedule them, and that impacts, our internal culture, our external culture, our donor relations. It's, a really good lesson that you've brought up. So another comment from Steve: if a hiring organization is looking at a candidate with no experience in fundraising, are there certificates and experience to look for? Where can orgs find those folks? And maybe we can talk a little bit about resumes and how people should position themselves. And maybe, I know this is a topic that you both think a lot about. What happens if you have a gap? Kind of talk about all of that.
Sure. So with resumes, we get questions about resumes all the time. Looking at Steve's question of certainly, not having experience, there's lots of different places. I would say if somebody's looking to get into fundraising, look at what's around you, like the Association of Fundraising Professionals, or CASE if it's more higher ed, or African American Development Organization, just sort of looking at some of these different places where you can gain some insight. Find a mentor who's close to you. Find someone that, might have the same interests. If you're, interested in working at like the ASPCA, working with animals versus working within higher education, definitely find a mentor and get involved if you can. Join different organizations. And put these things on your resume. Don't just say, "Oh, I'm a member of AFP." Really get involved with AFP, the Association for Fundraising Professionals, if someone doesn't know what that is. But and looking at your resume, I would say, I have several things to say about resumes, but, because we look at them all day long. On my desk, I have stacks of them, but, make sure you're talking about your successes, and not just, you don't want it to read like a job description. You want it to have the success, not, I was, successfully had a portfolio of 150. You want to talk about what did you do in that portfolio of 150 prospects, or whatever it might be. And if it says something like increased giving by 50%, I don't know what that means. I don't know what giving used to be and what it was, increased giving from 2 million to 4 million, or whatever. And making sure it's succinct. Talk about your successes all the time. That's what I tell folks. This is your time to shine. People are scanning that in like 30 seconds. So, exactly.
Right. Yeah. I'll add a little bit to that. And I always say, as Lisa said, your resume should read like an impact report, not a job description. So what I've been saying to candidates recently, and especially this is so relevant for fundraisers, you are your own campaign. Your resume is your impact report. Think about those impact reports that you send to donors. Your cover letter is your case statement. Okay. So really make sure that you are saying the impact that you have had in different organizations. I want to pick up on two things. For people who are moving into fundraising from other sectors, about a month ago, I had someone who wanted to go from, for-profit to nonprofit, and he spent about 15 minutes telling me how car sales was the same as fundraising. It's not. Okay, it's just not. But this person really thought that it was. And so if you're going to change sectors, do your homework, talk to people who have been in that field, understand how you can transfer your skills, before you get on the phone with a hiring manager or a recruiter. I want to talk about gaps on your resume. It's a really important question. And just this morning, I was on the phone with a woman, and her last tenure ended in 2018. And I asked her, tell me what you've been doing. And she shared that her husband had been sick, and, that she really had to be his caregiver. And then COVID hit, and then she was helping her family. And, I would say put caregiver on your resume. There is no more important, complicated work that you are doing than it is as a caregiver. It puts it right out there without apologizing for that gap. And if you say that you were a caregiver, then it takes the question out, because people, make up all kinds of stories in their head. In your cover letter, you can talk about the gap and your enthusiasm about getting back to the workforce, but you were working. If you were caring for someone, you were probably doing harder work than you've ever done in your life. You probably have come out of that with a different set of skills. If you were navigating elder care services for a parent, or whatever it might be. You don't have to get into descriptors, but I just think if we are getting into an era of more transparency and candor, if we're bringing our full selves in an authentic way, I think it's okay. And I would stand that up to a client any day of the week. So let's take the mystery out of things.
Boy, this is such fantastic advice. I put on a few slides that we had there. Let's kind of turn this around to the hiring manager. That part, and maybe a little bit about your work as recruiters. But first, how should people contact you, and in what cases should they contact you? I know lots of people are thinking, should I really reach out to Wendy and Lisa? They look fantastic here, but do they want to hear from me? So please dispel those myths.
We will talk to anyone. We are happy to give some advice on your resume, and we are happy to brainstorm if you're a hiring manager or in human resources and you want to talk a little bit about needs. We will literally, we spend half of our time talking with hiring managers, and we spend time talking with candidates just about, I'm not sure, I'm thinking about leaving, what's out there, what should my resume look like? I would need some advice on a cover letter. So we will talk to anyone. We'll put that out there.
So, and it's easy to find us. And I know that, Louise, you'll put up, our website, our emails. You can find us on LinkedIn. For hiring managers, for any search, we will make about 100 calls. We will do our research to identify folks with similar backgrounds or skills or experiences that might be a fit. We're going to have those conversations. Even if you have a fabulous HR team and great people in talent acquisition, and there are, the bandwidth sometimes is overwhelming depending on that number. So we are also going to reach out to people who are not in job searches. And, we placed someone earlier in the year who was not in a search, and I called, and we've known each other for a while, and she was interested in the job. And so when you're just posting a job, you're not going to get that kind of interest. Lisa and I have been at this a long time. We know a lot of folks. And as we said before, people call us back and we become an ambassador of your organization, right? And so we are going to be enthusiastic about your organization. And that's our opportunity to really sell this opportunity to this role and position to candidates. So we become an extension of your team. And if you want to find people in different regions, if you want to build an increased diversity on your teams, we are deeply involved with AADO, with Women of Color in Fundraising and Philanthropy, with many different organizations, and we're having conversations every day. So we are a tremendous added value to your organization.
Well, and we can see that today. So that's one of the beauties of this. We can actually hear it from you. Tell us a little bit about your firm and I understand you've been, you have lots of experience in the sector, but you've started working together recently and it's going swimmingly. Would love to hear more about that.
Sure. So Wendy and I kickstarted. So Boyden is a large firm. There are offices in about 45 countries, and we were brought on board to really kickstart the nonprofit side of the house. They do a really great job in technology and finance fields, and really wanted to expand nonprofit, as they call it, social impact. So we came on and working with clients across the country. We're based in Boston, but from Boston to LA and kind of everything in between. And we launched this in May, so it hasn't even been quite a year yet, and
Wow.
and just loving it, as
Absolutely.
you can tell.
So our practice, as Lisa said, is solely focused on the nonprofit sector, roles in fundraising, as well as CEO, executive director, marketing, communications, finance. What's really great about the Boyden model is that we work with our colleagues within the United States in many different cross sectors. So if we're doing a CFO search, we will reach out and partner with our colleagues on our financial services team. We also have an incredible group of colleagues in Canada that have a huge higher education practice. So we have a global footprint. We're also a small boutique firm. And so for every search, either Lisa or I are the lead on the search. And we have several other consultants who we work with who join us with their different expertise in content and geography. But every search is led by one of us. And so we really deliver very customized, service and very, very high touch service to clients and candidates.
Wonderful. This is absolutely great. And if I can give a little bit of context to how we met, it was, a kind of part of this little group. And here, promo moment. That
I need a T-shirt.
Yeah, me too. We get a T-shirt for this?
Okay, don't get started because
we'll send you a mug too, Louise.
Okay, well, let's meet halfway. We'll meet you in New York something, and we'll exchange. We'll meet in a parking lot. But Lisa and I started chatting because of the work of the Donor Participation Project, which is a group of fundraisers who meet monthly to discuss how to get more people to give. And you don't just do that by asking more. That's a spoiler alert. But you have been wonderful partners. And I have to say, we're putting on a conference, and you're going to be sponsoring a really important part of that conference, and we're super tremendously grateful. So thanks also for being kind of a part of the sector and of this little community that we're building. 1,100 fundraiser community. So we're looking forward to a tremendous year, and hopefully we're going to grow together a whole lot. Let me come back to the questions here in the chat. There were some good questions about not gaps, but contractor type situations. And somebody's asking, if you've been a long-term contractor for the same company for 3 years, but you're paid by a staffing firm, would you list your work experience under the company or staffing firm? And Wendy, amazing way to explain a challenging gap that so many people experience in their lifetime. So this contractor role, or maybe if you've been like a consultant that's been embedded somewhere running a campaign, how do you suggest that people position that?
Yeah, I think you can. I mean, I think you can say, XYZ company, and then you can have the names of the organizations and the role that you played. You want to be really authentic in terms of who you were working for and the projects that you were working on. So I think there's a way of just being, very clear about that.
Wonderful. Are you seeing that hiring managers are still looking to be flexible, or is there a subtle push to get employees back into the office on a more frequent basis? Is this tension also happening, on the onboarding side of candidates?
I think this is definitely a mix. I think there are some hiring managers that, saw how fruitful people were being remote and they're okay with somebody being remote. And then I think there's, definitely a push to get folks back into the office on some level. And I think when you're new and you're onboarding, my advice is always to people, you do want to be on campus for part of that, because you want to see who everybody is and interact. And I know it's a bit different. You're wearing masks and all of that, but you do want to interact, and you really get to feel what somebody's energy is like and their personality when you're, sitting in the dean's office or a chair of a department's office, more so than on Zoom. But we are seeing that there certainly is, hiring managers, usually it's kind of coming from above, the vice president, the president wants everybody back on campus. So, it's sort of a trickle down of people being back in the office.
Wonderful. Are there any other myths of executive recruiting that we need to take care of today? We've had, I would estimate around 100 people listening to us today, and what needs to get out there?
Yes. We are not headhunters. We are connectors. We are relationship builders, right? I'll just speak for Lisa and myself. I cannot speak with the entire, recruiting community. We love being on your journeys. We love getting to know you. Whenever we're doing a search, we're talking to 100 people, 99 people are not going to get the job. We want to know you and have a relationship, and we're going to be stewarding that relationship. So I would say, yes, if we reach out to you, please reach back out to us, because who knows, right? So don't ghost us. We won't ghost you. But really, there are so many people who didn't get the job, who Lisa and I remain in close contact with, and just, really love seeing what they're doing next and being their champion and reaching out to them for another job. And, I think that for me as a fundraiser, building relationships with donors and cultivating and stewarding those relationships, that's exactly how I think about the work that I do with the, thousands of people who are in my network. And it just is the best part of the job, is being, getting to know people and being on their career journeys.
I think sometimes there's a confidentiality piece. Folks feel like, if I reach out to Lisa, will she tell somebody, I'm working at Yale, and she might know someone, she's connected with 3 other people at Yale. And having a conversation with us is totally confidential. I don't intend to contact anybody's supervisor to let them know, oh, I just heard from so-and-so, because our business would be sunk. We need candidates as much as we need clients. Right. So anybody could pick up the phone and have a conversation with us or get some advice. I'm looking to go into a different sector. I've been in higher ed for 10 years. I really feel a pull to, work within a hospital. Have you seen this? Do you know of anyone? And I'm always happy to make a connection. Oh, I have a good friend who did that and works here and there, and I'd be happy to make. So sometimes it's just connecting different people together. We would be happy to do that.
That's amazing. So,
thanks, Rebecca.
More. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say thank you, Rebecca. So sweet. Thank you.
Well, and Rebecca is also a volunteer leader in the donor participation project. She chairs a small group discussion group. She is amazing. So
I
see so many friendly people. Dan Saunders just put a comment in. Steve, who we mentioned earlier, Kathy. It's so wonderful to be here among friends and meeting new people, right? So if Lisa and Wendy are new to you, reach out to them. We're on LinkedIn, so you can just click on their names and connect with them. That's part of the magic here. So Dan Saunders, who's a wonderful colleague, has a great question, and he's saying, what can employers do to ward off the Great Resignation? I've heard it called the Great Reshuffle. People come up with all these funny names, right?
Right.
But we talked about culture earlier. Do you have other advice?
I would say check in with people. If you want to know how your employees are feeling, ask them. All too often, I worked in human resources, and I remember sitting around a table with, a handful of managers, and everybody was assuming how people felt. And I thought, like, why aren't we just asking them? Let's just check in with folks and see how they're feeling, see if they like working, or what's the problem, or how can we improve? because a lot of times people are leaving, not really saying why they're leaving. Maybe it's culture, maybe it's money, maybe they really wanted that senior director role they applied for 2 years ago and didn't get, and they're still in that director role. They don't see a path for success, so they leave. And instead of helping somebody build towards, okay, you want to be the senior director, here's what we thought you were missing when you applied for it 2 years ago, but here's what we'd like to see you put in place. And I think sometimes folks leave to gain that next step in their career ladder instead of talking to a manager about how can I get there, or what tools do I need? Do I need to take a class in whatever it might be? So I would say that the biggest thing is ask your employees, see what can change. Is it a cultural thing? Can everybody sit around the table and really have good, honest conversations about what do we need to do in order to keep everyone? Because it costs so much money, whether you're not even if you're hiring, a recruiter to help, but if somebody isn't sitting in that seat, they're not getting out there and meeting with donors, or not building relationships. And certainly they're not bringing in money, but donors start to feel like nobody's called me from that university in a year. And I used to always, be checked in on. So, I don't know what Dan's doing now, but check in with folks.
I would add to this also, and I had a great conversation a few months ago with Jason Lewis on his podcast, and we talked about this, right? And so wouldn't it be interesting if we treated our employees the same way that we treat our donors, right? What is that? Cultivating and stewarding our employees, recognizing birthdays, appreciating them, making sure they feel seen, not taking donors away from them when they join the board or when they've made a larger gift, making sure that your, major gift officers are having access throughout the organization, right? And, if your CEO or your president says like, hey, went out on a visit with Sally, she's really great. Tell Sally that the president thought she was great, or recommend that the president reach out to her, But when you think about your gift officers, and maybe someone is bringing in $2 million or $5 million, what if we thought of them as a $2 million donor or a $5 million donor? Would we start to treat them differently? And so I really think it is letting your employees know you value them in just a very kind of visible and authentic kind of way.
This is such great advice. And we referenced that post earlier from Jim, right? Jim Langley. And he mentioned Peter Drucker, who years and years ago said in the knowledge economy, you're going to have to treat your employees like volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
All of these pieces of advice you're sharing, Wendy, are things we do with our donors, right?
Yeah.
So it's incredible how everything is coming around. Deb Best, another wonderful volunteer in the Donor Participation Project and a leader in her own right, asks, does one have to be at a certain level in their nonprofit career to qualify to work with a recruiter? I'm sure you hear this a lot, or if you don't, I can tell you lots of people are thinking about this.
I think, and Louis, you and I were talking about this, I think the term, executive recruiter, it makes it sound like you have to be a vice president or a senior vice president. I need to run the whole company in order to call Lisa or Wendy. And that's not the case at all. We work with a lot of folks that are, associate directors of development with, 2 years of experience. So there doesn't have to be a level because we place folks in that same type of a role. So I think you don't have to be at any type of a level, and you can check in. Certainly with us, and I'm sure with other search firms as well, you can always check in with somebody and say, here's where I want to be in 5 years, because we're working with institutions that might say, yes, we need an AVP, but that AVP has to build their team, and they're going to need a senior director and a director and an associate. And that will tip me off. Oh, geez, I spoke with Jane Doe about a year ago, and I know Jane was looking for this exact same role. Could I introduce the two of you? Could I make an introduction? So there isn't any type of a level, so to say, to work with us or to work with a recruiter.
That's so great, and it resonates with so much of what you were saying of kind of think of running a campaign for yourself, right? Mm-hmm. And how would you keep in touch with your donors, right? You'd keep, from time to time, you check in,
right?
It sounds like that's what you are endorsing, and that you want to hear from people. Cameron Hall has a great question. What is a strategy or strategies for organizations that struggle to attract any applicants to increase the number of qualified applicants to their open positions? And I tell you, the struggle is real. I can vouch for that.
Just call us. That's easy.
Good. Okay. Next.
Us. Boyden, call us, reach out to us. And I don't mean to be flip, because I do know that not every organization can, really afford to hire a search firm. I would make sure that your employees are serving as your ambassadors, that everyone around the organization is maybe posting on LinkedIn, sharing with their network, and your boards as well. Your board member is your ambassador for many different things, and they could also be your ambassador for applicants. Many of your board members probably serve on other nonprofit boards, are donors to other nonprofits. So I would, definitely share job descriptions, and I would ask the people who are already your ambassadors to support, to support your work.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Sorry, Lisa, go ahead.
No. I was just going to say one thing that, Wendy had mentioned earlier was about our role as a recruiter and how it's different, because we are literally making 100 to 150 phone calls for one position. And so it's not that, Cameron isn't able to attract people to his organization. It's that, they're inundated with information, I'm sure, and you need somebody to make outbound phone calls and pick up the phone or send a LinkedIn note or send an email and say, I'm working with X institution that's doing this, that, and the other thing. You have such a great background. Do you have 5 minutes to talk about this opportunity? And I'm sure he doesn't have time to do this. And that's why, we're there, certainly.
Absolutely. What does it look like for those who are maybe new in management positions and are, might have a budget, could ask for a budget? What does it look like to work with you versus just maybe, putting some ads out on one of the job boards?
So when we start working with an organization on a search, maybe you've already created a job description. Maybe you haven't. We're going to take you wherever you're at, and we're going to spend, a couple of weeks really getting to know you, understanding the organization, understanding where you are at this point in time. We want to read your strategic plans, right? We want to understand the impact of this person's role. We want to talk to the people who this person will be working with and really getting to know the organization. More often than not, there's alignment all around, but sometimes we'll talk about title. We've certainly had clients who have said, not quite sure what the title should be, not quite sure what the level should be. When we get to know your board members, especially, we get a sense of perhaps how much experience, what different kinds of experience. So we become your partners from the very beginning in terms of really kind of making sure that we have a good idea of the profile of the candidates who you'll be working with. But we come in, where you are at. I will share as well that we've started working with clients when they've tried to do the search on their own and they have not been able to find qualified candidates. And so we push pause. It's no fun to press restart, but we do oftentimes. We set a timeline and we really put our process in place. So, people come to us at all different times.
Wonderful. So we're nearing the top of the hour. Many of the busy fundraising professionals will have a meeting to go to. I'm sure you both have a packed afternoon. So before we leave, I just want to make sure that people feel comfortable reaching out to both of you here on LinkedIn, or I'll display both your contact info sheets on the Boyden side. So for Lisa, right there, boyden.com/Lisa-Vuona. And for Wendy, it's same structure for that link. We're deeply grateful to both of you. You heard about this crazy group doing a conference, and why would they all get together and want to build awareness around the fact that their people are stopping to give to nonprofits, and we need to turn things around. And you're talking with talent every day that undoubtedly has thoughts about that and feels deeply about having more representative donor bases, more numerous donor bases, more participatory donor bases, right? So, and you decided to support it. And for that, we're grateful. If folks want to hear more about what that support means and help us out, we have a pre-conference site and it's right there on the screen. Thank you, Lisa and Wendy. Do you
Thank
have
you.
any closing remarks, invitations for folks? What would you like to share with the world?
What I would share is, please follow us on LinkedIn, engage with us, give us a call. And, we're just so excited to be part of this group. We want to be in it with all of you. We're just grateful for this opportunity. For those of you who we know, great to see all of you. For those that we're just meeting, really, please do reach out. We're looking forward to talking with you, to helping you on your career journeys, and to helping your organizations really maximize their impact.
And it
Beautiful.
doesn't cost anything to call us. We brainstorm with folks all the time. So feel free to reach out, call, email, send a LinkedIn note. We're happy to connect.
Wonderful. And to those who are posting their questions now, please rest assured we'll follow up with you, and one of us will make sure you're answered. We want to make everybody feel seen today. All your comments and your likes, even if we couldn't get to them, please do reach out. But just know that we're grateful that you were here and you could make some time. Thanks so much. Have a great one.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.